The metallic clink of the lighter hitting the polished floor echoed across the crowded hall like a gunshot. Grace Harper froze mid-step. She had been walking toward the family seating area of the Marine Corps recruit graduation ceremony at Camp Pendleton, her hands full of a purse, a folded program, and a small bouquet of flowers for her nephew. The lighter, an old battered Zippo, had slipped from her jacket pocket and now lay spinning slowly on the tile, catching the California sunlight streaming through the high windows. Before she could bend down to retrieve it, a young Marine Lance Corporal, no older than 20, with a fresh haircut and crisp dress blues, stepped forward and scooped it up. "Ma'am, you dropped this," he said with a polite smile, holding the Zippo between his thumb and forefinger. Grace reached for it, but the young Marine had already turned it over in his hand, his eyes catching the worn engravings on the brushed chrome surface. His smile faltered, his brow furrowed. "Whoa," he muttered, squinting at the faded lettering. "This is old." Grace extended her hand, her expression calm but unreadable. "Thank you, Lance Corporal. I'll take that." But the Marine didn't hand it back. He was too absorbed in what he was reading, his lips moving silently as he traced the inscriptions with his eyes. On one side of the Zippo, scratched in rough, hurried handwriting, were the words, "Khe Sanh, 1968. On the other side, "Doc saved 12. And beneath that, in even smaller letters, a list of names: Miller, Rodriguez, Chang, O'Brien, Kowalski, Williams, Jackson, Thompson, Martinez, Reeves, Bishop, Nguyen. 12 names, 12 lives. The Lance Corporal looked up at Grace, his expression shifting from curiosity to something closer to confusion. "Ma'am, is this real? I mean, this says Khe Sanh. That was like Vietnam, right?" Grace's hand remained outstretched, steady as stone. "Yes, it was. And it says Doc, like a Navy corpsman? Was this your husband's or something?" Grace's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. Her voice, when she answered, was quiet but carried an edge that could cut steel. "It was mine." The Marine blinked. "Yours?" "Mine." For a long moment the young Marine just stared at her, at this woman in her mid-70s with neatly styled silver blonde hair, a soft lavender blouse, and a gentle, grandmotherly demeanor. She looked like someone who should be baking cookies, not holding a relic from one of the bloodiest sieges in American military history. She laughed, not cruelly, but with the kind of nervous, dismissive chuckle that comes from disbelief. "Ma'am, no offense, but women weren't combat medics in Vietnam." He glanced at his buddy, another young Marine standing nearby who had wandered over to see what the fuss was about. "Right?" His friend shrugged. "I mean, there were nurses, but they were like in hospitals, not out in the field." The first Marine turned the Zippo over again, inspecting it with the kind of cocky skepticism that only youth and ignorance can produce. "This is cool, don't get me wrong," he said, his tone patronizing. "But I think someone might have sold you a fake, ma'am. Or maybe it was your dad's. A lot of people collected this stuff as memorabilia. My uncle has a whole box of Vietnam gear. He bought it at an Army surplus store." Grace's eyes, pale blue, steady, and impossibly calm, locked onto his. "Give me the lighter, Lance Corporal." Her voice was soft, but it wasn't a request. The Marine hesitated. Something in her tone made the hair on the back of his neck stand up, but pride in the audience of his peer kept him rooted in place. "Ma'am, I'm just saying, if this is authentic, you should probably donate it to a museum or something. It's a piece of history. But if someone told you you carried it at Khe Sanh, I think somebody was pulling your leg." Grace didn't move, didn't blink. Her hand remained extended. "Last time, Marine. Give me the lighter." 50 feet away, standing near the edge of the parade deck entrance, Sergeant Major Vincent Cross had been watching the entire exchange. Cross was a man carved from granite and hard lessons. At 58 years old, with 36 years of service under his belt, his chest was a tapestry of ribbons, bronze stars, purple hearts, a Navy cross. His face was weathered, his eyes sharp, and his instincts honed to a razor's edge. He'd noticed the woman the moment she walked in, not because she stood out, she didn't, but because she moved with a certain economy, a particular kind of situational awareness that you didn't get from civilian life. She scanned the room before choosing her seat. She kept her back to the wall. She noted the exits. It was subtle, but Cross had spent his entire career learning to read people. When the Zippo hit the floor, Cross's attention sharpened. When the young Marine picked it up and started reading it out loud, Cross's blood ran ice cold. He knew that lighter. He didn't know her, but he knew the story. Every senior NCO who'd served in the Corps long enough had heard the legend of Khe Sanh's Doc Harper, the Navy corpsman who'd held the line during the 77-day siege, the one who'd pulled 12 Marines out of the fire, the one who'd earned a Navy Cross and then vanished into retirement, refusing interviews, refusing recognition, refusing to be turned into a symbol. Cross had seen the lighter before, in a photograph, in a dusty Marine Corps history book in the Quantico Library. It had been held by a young woman in utilities, her face streaked with dirt, her eyes exhausted but defiant. He looked at the woman now. Silver hair, lavender blouse, quiet dignity. Holy hell. Cross didn't run, but his stride was fast, purposeful, and urgent. By the time Cross reached the scene, the situation had deteriorated. The young Marine, emboldened by his buddy's support and the growing crowd of onlookers, had decided to double down. "Ma'am, look, I'm not trying to be disrespectful," he said, still holding the Zippo just out of Grace's reach. "But I think you're confused. Khe Sanh was a Marine base. Corpsmen were there, yeah, but they were men. All of them. I've read the books. I've seen the documentaries." His friend nodded. "Plus, ma'am, this lighter's in really good shape for being 50-something years old. I'm just saying, it looks like a reproduction." Grace's hand finally lowered. She took a slow, measured breath. "You've read the books," she repeated, her voice soft, almost amused. "Yes, ma'am." "And you've seen the documentaries?" "Yes, ma'am." Grace nodded slowly. "Then you should know that Khe Sanh wasn't just Marines. It was also Navy corpsmen, Army advisors, Air Force forward air controllers. And yes, Lance Corporal, there were women." The Marine scoffed. "Not in combat, ma'am." Grace's eyes hardened. "Son, I was the combat."
For a fraction of a second, the sterile, sunlit hall dissolved. The polished floors became red clay and sandbags. The hum of conversation became the distant thump, thump, thump of incoming mortars. The California sunshine became the oppressive, dust-choked haze of a siege that never ended. Grace wasn't 74 anymore. She was 23, her hands slick with blood, her utilities soaked with sweat and mud. Around her, the fire base was chaos, shouting, explosions, the sharp crack of AK-47 fire rattling against the perimeter. "Corpsman! Corpsman!" She ran, not toward safety, toward the screaming. A Marine, 18 years old, maybe 19, his name tape reading Miller, lay sprawled in the dirt, his leg shredded by shrapnel. His eyes were wide, glassy with shock. "Doc," he gasped, his voice breaking. "Doc, I can't feel my leg. I can't—" "Look at me, Miller," Grace commanded, her voice cutting through his panic like a blade. She was already working. Tourniquet, pressure, morphine. Her hands moved with brutal efficiency. "You're going home, devil dog. You hear me? You're going home." Behind her, another voice screamed, then another. She ran to the next, and the next, and the next. 12 Marines, 77 days. When the siege finally lifted, when the choppers came and the Marines were evacuated, one of them, a big, quiet kid from Ohio named Rodriguez, had pressed something into her hand before they loaded him onto the bird. It was a Zippo lighter, scratched, dented, covered in mud. "We all chipped in, Doc," he said, his voice hoarse. We got our names on it, so you don't forget us." Grace had looked down at the lighter, at the 12 names etched into the metal, and felt something crack inside her chest. "I could never forget you," she whispered. Rodriguez smiled, a tired, grateful smile. "We know, Doc. That's why you're one of us." The memory shattered as a voice, deep, commanding, and sharp as a rifle shot, cut across the hall. "Lance Corporal!" Every head in the room turned. Sergeant Major Cross stood 10 feet away, his face a mask of cold fury. Beside him, moving with equal speed, was Brigadier General Marcus Hale, the base commander, and Captain Rebecca Ortiz, the base chaplain. The entire hall went silent. The young Marine's face drained of all color. He snapped to attention so fast he nearly dropped the Zippo. "Sergeant Major," he stammered. Cross didn't acknowledge him. His eyes were locked on Grace. He stopped 3 feet in front of her, brought his heels together with a sharp crack, and rendered the crispest, most respectful salute the young Marine had ever seen in his life. "Petty Officer Harper," Cross said, his voice ringing across the silent hall. "On behalf of the United States Marine Corps, it is an honor to have you here, ma'am." The words hit the room like a bomb. Grace slowly straightened. She returned the salute, not casually, but with the practiced precision of someone who had done it under fire. "Sergeant Major," she said quietly. General Hale stepped forward, rendering his own salute. "Petty Officer Harper, welcome back to Pendleton." Cross turned to face the stunned crowd and the young Marine, who looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. "For those of you who don't know," Cross began, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall, "this woman is Hospital Corpsman Second Class Grace Harper, United States Navy, retired." He paused, letting the title sink in. From January to April of 1968, Petty Officer Harper was attached to the 26th Marine Regiment at Khe Sanh Combat Base during the siege. The silence was absolute. For 77 days, she treated casualties under sustained artillery bombardment, sniper fire, and ground assaults. She performed triage in bunkers. She ran through open ground to reach wounded Marines. She worked without sleep, without rest, and without fear. Cross's voice grew harder. On March 6, 1968, during a coordinated enemy assault on the base perimeter, Petty Officer Harper single-handedly stabilized 12 critically wounded Marines under direct fire. She refused evacuation, she refused relief, and she refused to let a single one of them die. He took a step closer to the young Marine, who was visibly shaking now. She was awarded the Navy Cross, the second highest decoration for valor in combat. That lighter you're holding, those 12 names, those are the Marines she saved. Cross held out his hand. "Now, give it back." The Marine's hands trembled, and he placed the Zippo into Cross's palm. Cross turned and gently, respectfully, handed it to Grace. "Ma'am." Grace took the lighter, her fingers closing around it with the reverence of someone holding a sacred object. "Thank you, Sergeant Major." General Hale addressed the young Marine directly now, his voice firm but measured. "Lance Corporal, what's your name?" "Hayes, sir," he croaked. "Lance Corporal Hayes, you just learned a very important lesson. Do you know what it is?" Hayes swallowed hard. "Sir, don't assume." "Closer, but not quite. The lesson is this. Respect is not given based on what you see. It's given based on what someone has earned. You saw an old woman. You didn't see a warrior." He gestured to Grace. "Petty Officer Harper could have corrected you immediately. She could have pulled rank, pulled credentials, pulled history, but she didn't. Do you know why?" Hayes shook his head. because she doesn't need to prove anything to you or to anyone. Her record speaks for itself. The Marines she saved speak for her. That lighter speaks for her." His voice softened slightly. "But you, Lance Corporal Hayes, have a choice now. You can learn from this moment, or you can let pride bury the lesson. What's it going to be?" Hayes turned to Grace, his eyes red. "Ma'am, Petty Officer Harper, His voice broke. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I should have listened. I should have—" Grace held up a hand, stopping him gently. "You did your job, Marine. You were respectful, you were curious. That's not wrong." She stepped closer, her voice soft but firm. "But here's what you need to remember. Don't soften the standard. Just make sure you're seeing the whole picture before you judge. You saw an old woman with a lighter. You didn't see the story behind it. That's the lesson." She placed a hand on his shoulder, not condescending, but kind. "Carry that with you." The graduation ceremony proceeded. Grace was escorted to the front row, seated beside the general and the sergeant major. Her nephew, a fresh-faced recruit named Danny, stood in formation with his platoon, tears streaming down his face as he realized what had just happened. After the ceremony, as families flooded the parade deck and Marines embraced their loved ones, Danny found his aunt. "Aunt Grace," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "You never told me. You never—" Grace smiled, a small, weary smile. "There are some things you don't talk about, Danny. You just carry them." She held up the Zippo, the names glinting in the sunlight. "But you never forget." That night, alone in her hotel room, Grace sat by the window and flicked the Zippo open. The flame sparked to life, small and steady. And for a moment, she wasn't in California anymore. She was back in Khe Sanh, back in the mud and the blood and the smoke. She heard their voices, Miller, Rodriguez, Shang, O'Brien, all of them, laughing, joking, calling her Doc with the kind of affection that only Marines give to the ones who save their lives. She closed the lighter. The flame died, but the memory never would. Subscribe to Tales of Valor for more stories of courage, sacrifice, and legacy.
Subscribe to Tales of Valor for more stories of courage, sacrifice, and legacy.